Good evening. Today is July 5th, 2021, and this is the 58th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. Before we begin our show today, it is my hope that all Americans had an opportunity to celebrate a joyful and prosperous 4th of July, and that you were able to celebrate the 4th in peace and also were able to commemorate the heroes who achieved that peace for us in the nation's 425th birthday. The first of my special guests today is my friend and also one of those honored men who, through his selfless service to our nation, contributed to our collective prosperity. Lieutenant Colonel Dean Ladd is a retired United States Marine Corps officer who was born in Spokane, Washington. He is 101 years old this coming December 8th. He was born in 1920. He enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserves in April of 1939. He was able to complete 1 year at Washington State College before being called up to active duty in November of 1940. He did receive a field commission and also saw extensive World War II combat in the Pacific with the 2nd Marine Division at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and also Tien. As he has recalled in his book, which we're going to be speaking about today, which is Faithful Warriors. Lieutenant Colonel Ladd was wounded 3 times. The most serious of the wounds that he received was during his landing in Tarawa. After 5 years, he did return to receive his mechanical engineering degree and also was an engineer for 3 years at Kaiser Aluminum, 6 years at North American Aviation, and followed that up with 23 years at Lockheed on aerospace programs. He maintained and remained on active in Marine Reserves for a total of 30 years, retiring at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Dean has been a leader in many organizations. He was a president of Lockheed Maintenance Management Association, a Boy Scout commissioner, church deacon, a school board member, and served in various Republican Party positions, which included the vice chairman of the Spokane County Republican Central Committee. He was the president of the Retired Officer Association, which I'm a full-time member of, and also the Sons of the American Revolution, and also the Engineers Forum. Joining Lieutenant Colonel Ladd is Stephen Weingartner, who is the editor-in-chief of the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, the company that I'm a CEO of. Stephen is an award-winning military affairs writer and editor specializing in military history, national security strategy, defense policy, and national multi-strategy and operations. He is the author of the critically acclaimed Faithful Warriors, A Combat Marines Remembers the Pacific War, written by Colonel Dean Ladd and also published by the Naval Institute Press. Stephen also wrote Lala's Story, a memoir of the Holocaust, written with Lala Fishman and Stephen. He is the 1988 recipient of the Carl Sandburg Award for Nonfiction. Gentlemen, it is great to have you here. Colonel, it is an honor to have you here on the show today. Welcome. Colonel, did you hear me?
Dean Ladd. I hear you fine. I hear you fine. Hello?
Colonel, I was going to ask you, I know they were speaking about about your combat experience. I know you're going to be 101 years old in December. Let me ask you, first of all, how did you celebrate the 4th yesterday? What were some of the things that you were able to participate in?
I was with my grandchildren and great-grandchildren at their home yesterday. Great. They were having fun in their pool.
Colonel, have the grandchildren, did they ever ask you about your experience when you were in Tarawa or Guadalcanal? Have you ever had any of those discussions with them? I should say the grandchildren.
Yes, I do. I have 17 grandchildren. Yes.
But Daddy, you have had conversations with them.
We have a lot of conversations, yeah. Yeah. In fact, one of them, my one grandchild, Paul, he was born on the same same anniversary date as I got wounded on Tarawa.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In 1943, November 21st. Yep.
I know that when you got wounded in Tarawa, it was very hard. I understand the action and the operations you went through. I wanted to, before we get to Tarawa, kind of talk to you about Guadalcanal. What happened? Why were you guys in Guadalcanal, and how did you from there maneuver directly to basically go into Tarawa?
All right, we were, right after the war was declared, within a week we were on our way to American Samoa, Pango Pango, and immediately to block the Japanese from coming down and cutting our supply line to New Zealand and Australia. We were there until October, and what happened was all of a sudden there was a improvement in the situation where we had a big battle at Midway, and that turned the table a little bit, enough so that we no longer had to stay on Samoa, but immediately in October went to Guadalcanal to reinforce the ones already been there for 3 months. Then we were there for another 3 months fighting.
I know that you joined. I know that you joined in April of 1933, as I said in your bio, and I know that prior to Pearl Harbor, there's a lot of Americans were not for the war. What was it that really kind of wanted you to join the Marine Reserve? Because I know you had to talk your parents into allowing you permission to join at a young age. Did you know that? Go ahead.
Yeah, basically, I was 18 years old and getting near ready to retire. I mean, to graduate from high school, and the local reserve was very active as far as getting recruits for the organized reserve. And of course, I had been involved in rifle shooting a lot, and then I went to college. Well, right after I joined the reserve, then I was in ROTC at Washington State University, and so I was on the rifle team there, and we won the 9th Corps Area Championship. So anyway, it was pretty easy to get sold on joining the Marine Corps and getting involved in the rifle shooting.
Was there any sense at that time that you had as a young man that it might be possible that what was happening in Europe, that you might be involved in war in the future?
We had no.
Was that a sense of understanding yet, or no?
We had no idea at all. Things were moving that way, but they had been already moving that way a couple of years in Europe. The first active duty for training was 2 weeks in San Diego. The second one, the following year, was at Bremerton. So it was at Bremerton that all of a sudden it looked like we are about ready to get involved. So as soon as then they called us to active duty, and we thought, well, we're going to be gone maybe a year, you know. Turned out we were gone 5.5 years, and including the beginning and clear through the whole World War II situation.
Those were duration, right? You were in for the duration, pardon? Isn't that what they call it? You were in for the duration.
In for the duration, yeah.
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 And then I ended up. Dean, isn't that when they formed the two Marine divisions, first and second? And you were in the second.
I was when the reserves joined the regulars, the ones from Spokane joined a brigade, which became, within a few months later, a division. The same thing happened on the East Coast, the same idea.
Dean, my question to you would be, when you came in initially, I know we hear that before World War II, there was a lot of shortages, that sometimes U.S. troops had to train on wooden weapons. Did that ever happen to you guys, or were you guys pretty much, the war machine was already gearing up to fight?
We were well equipped. The only thing was, we had World War I rifles, you know, and helmets. The Army got that stuff a little before we did. So when we went into combat on Guadalcanal, we were using those type of helmets, and the 03 rifle.
Dean, I wanted to fast forward a little bit into Tarawa, and then
Yes.
I do want to ask Stephen to talk a little bit on his behalf. But I want to know your experience on Tarawa. I know that you got wounded there, and it is something. The worst thing that a soldier wants to receive is a gut shot. Tell me a little bit about your experiences as to how you guys got deployed as a reserve and were able to move into the beachhead there. Tell us a little bit about some of the experiences, what happened there, and some of the things that are still to this day are fresh in your mind.
Well, we were supposed to, the unit I was in was supposed to land further on up the beach and then come on downstream to the southwest where the main landing was. Well, it turned out that everything got so goofed up, top people didn't know even, they thought we'd already landed even, they didn't know. And we were out there circling in the LCVP landing boats for over 20 hours in the water and seasick and all. So then when we finally were ordered to land, here we were told to land on the worst beach it could be. Ran into half a dozen machine guns shooting at us all at once there on Red Beach 2, right adjacent to the west of the pier.
I know that in the U.S. Army, as we set up, we used to set up these kill sacks to bring the enemy in and kill them there. Most of our machine guns used to be pretty much just put on automatic, where you didn't even have to move them, traverse them left or right to know where actually you're firing, and then you would have interlocking fields of fire. I do know that the Navy had initially... Go ahead.
Yeah, well, normally, if you're in the offense, you have your machine guns on the flank and really being very effective in that position. But the Japanese, they were strung all along the beach with their portable weapons, you see, and they just plastered as we walked in for that 550, 600 yards, bullets were hitting us all around. So
I think it's worth emphasizing. Yeah, I think it's worth emphasizing that Dean and his the units that landed at Red Beach 2, that was 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, B Company was his company, B18.
Right.
Their boats got hung up on a reef, their landing boats, the Higgins boats, and that was not anticipated. Right. It was thought that they would clear the reef. So they had to disembark from the boats 600 yards from shore, 600 yards, interlocking machine gun fire, wading through water. Imagine that.
Yep.
People rightly say that scene of Omaha Beach in Saving Private Ryan is dramatic, but they were on the beach. Dean and his men had to wade 600 yards, and Dean, you used to call that the fire was so intense it was curtains of fire. Isn't that how you described it?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, you use that term too, and that's where I got my idea primarily, was from the book, the way it was described, and I just took off from there too, describing it.
But and Dean and his buddies would talk about how they the only way they could survive was to watch where the bullets were splashing on the water, and as they traversed across the water, they would duck under the bullets, and then they had to get up and
keep going. If you're lucky, we could time it that way. But boy, I saw them coming. There's just too many of them. You couldn't duck them all. You might pop back up just in this one catching your face,
Dean, I know that there was a lot of artillery fire that went in. There was, of course, the battleship groups were putting rounds on the beach. I know that even the Air Force pounded that location. What happened with that process, with the communication? Because, I mean, the day one groups went in, they got stuck on the reef. How were you guys communicating at that time?
Naval gunfire was in its infancy as far as how to as a target that is just a narrow strip. You got to hit that. Either you're under it or you're over it. You're very lucky if you hit the strip itself. So anyway, it was very ineffective at first. In fact, probably most of the time, the naval gunfire wasn't what knocked out the fortifications. It
passed over the island for the most part.
Yeah, just go right on through and right over. Yeah. So we learned a lot. That's the first time we'd ever done it. It's the first time we'd ever landed against a heavily defended defended assault landing. The only other time similar to that was Gallipoli in World War I.
There you go.
Dean, I guess my next question would be, in this case, I know, that's the day that you were wounded. And I know that in battle you say, if you're wounded, you got to move on and get to the beachhead. And got a couple of the soldiers you had did not listen and actually came to your rescue.
You do not stop for other wounded. If you do that, everybody's going to get killed. Two of my men stopped for many. I said, move on in. No, they stayed with me.
Sometimes it's good to have those.
Yeah, they stayed with you and pulled you back to the landing craft. Yeah.
That's
I know Private Solomon.
Nobody's supposed to stop for everybody else. You'd all get killed.
I know that Private Solomon was one of them, and he did help get you back. And when they were struggling to try to get you back on the ship, you even had other soldiers that were wounded to help you.
Yeah, true. And then they tried to go ahead.
Go ahead, Colonel. Go ahead.
Well, what I'm going to say then, when they dragged me about 100 yards parallel to the beach over to a landing craft that was over there picking up the wounded, and if it hadn't been for Eddie Albert, the famous movie actor, he was in charge of the boatways coming from the transport that I was on, and so he realized that there's a lot of people who are going to be drowning. They had to be picked up right now and taken back to the troop transport. And so this one that picked me up, there's about 15 others just writhing in pain on the deck, and they couldn't get me up over the ramp because it was at an angle. It wasn't completely lowered, and so there was a fellow that was in the water with me, and I said, "Get him up, move him up first." And he had a massive wound in one eye, and he was dying. And so when he shot him up over the ramp, he reached on down with the remaining energy he had and helped pull me up. And then as we were taken aboard ship, he was lying next to me in a stretcher, and I says, "We made it." And he says, "You've made it." And then he died.
I'm sorry to hear that. I know it was hard to read that portion, and I know you've tried to find that soldier ever since, but you haven't been able to find out who that soldier was.
No, he died. He died right on as they're lifting onto the transport. The other guy, Sullivan, I never did find him, and the third soldier that helped, he did go on in the beach and later was killed there. And I found out where he was buried when I visited years later.
But Dean, were you ever able to identify the soldier who pulled you in and then died?
That's what I'm talking about. And he's on the internet.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, it's somewhere on my website. I get in those details.
Okay.
Yeah.
Colonel. I guess one thing that I want to kind of look at is, taking the type of round you did. I know it was a medium machine gun that hit you. And if a lot of people don't know, you guys were even receiving fire from behind you because the Japanese had moved into destroyed on Lee in the back, which was in the harbor itself, and they were starting to shoot from behind at you guys.
Well, the main place is that we had one of our transports that had landed there, forced to land there just before Pearl Harbor, or just after. And so here that had been, it ran against the beach, and it was a British ship, by the way, British type of ship. Anyway, it was firing at us, machine gun fire at us from the flank, you see, giving us all kinds of problems. And it took one of our planes came in and strafed it, and then eventually some of the other Marines were able to get aboard and wiped out the machine gun that was on there.
Did they ever tell you how many liters of blood you lost or how much blood you lost that day? Because I know that the stuff you have for medical support these days is not what you had back there. You literally had just nothing more than
30s of blood. No, as far as I know, we had had enough blood. Yeah, they sure used a lot of blood for me, I know.
Dean, tell them about your doctor. The good luck you had with that on the Sheridan.
Oh,
the ship they
it's
took
incredible. You know, as I was raised onto the troop transport, I was immediately moved into the little operating room, and immediately they started cutting me open. The surgeon in charge had been an abdominal specialist at Mayo Clinic. Look at the odds of that being the case. And as he got through, he had to stitch up my bladder and had to remove quite a bit of the intestines and rehook them up. And when he got through, I didn't even have to wear a bag afterwards. Incredible. And then a year later, he was operating on a guy at Naval Training Station in Idaho, and he dropped dead of a heart attack at age 55. Can you imagine?
Well, everything happens for a reason, Colonel, and I'm glad that those soldiers did their part, got your back. You did your part, leading your men towards a beachhead. You got wounded in this case, and the rest, as we know, is history, but all tied together with soldiers helping each other.
I was just a week or so ago, I got thinking a little bit about how I had looked at God's provision for me. He wasn't through with me yet. The Lord wasn't, as it turns out. In other words, I was lined up to become, and take leadership. You see, that was the whole idea. I still have more to go.
Yeah, more to go, Colonel.
After, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're with us, Colonel, and I know that you had initially looked at the book. The title for the book wasn't the first time that was used. This question will go to Stephen. Is how did you and the Colonel link up? What was it that brought you two together?
Well, we were linked up through a mutual acquaintance in the publishing business. Dean had already self-published a book on his World War II experiences, and he wanted to elaborate on it. And he approached this publisher, and the publisher asked me if I wanted to be involved with it. And I had just gotten finished writing a book about the Holocaust, and I decided that I never wanted ever again to write a book about people who were prisoners and in a situation to be helpless. It was a very trying experience just writing and doing the research for it. So when the chance to do a book on the combat Marine came up, I jumped at it. And I started talking to Dean, and we got along instantly. We both liked talking to each other. And we both decided that we could build the book into sort of a Band of Brothers type book. I mean, we didn't copy it, but but I decided he had so many of his guys in his unit who were still alive and well. We thought we would expand the story into Dean's story and with input from his buddies. So we sat down. It took about 5 years to write. We interviewed on tape maybe 10, 15 of the men in his unit, B-18 mostly, and we followed him from his experience in California to Samoa to Guadalcanal, and with the interim in New Zealand, which is a story in and of itself. And then came and then came Tarawa.
My old girlfriend there, still alive. She's only 2 years younger than I am.
Yeah, Dean had all the Marines had girlfriends in New Zealand. We titled that chapter Paradise or Heaven, because it was after Guadalcanal. It was just a wonderful place, and the New Zealanders were the grandest people in the world. And Dean had a girlfriend. I want to emphasize this was before he met his wife and got married, and she's still alive too. And Dean still communicates with her. Anyway, going on with the book. So in each section of the book, we tell Dean's story in the first person, and then we do like an oral history of maybe 10 of his buddies, what they're doing at the same time. And after Tarawa, they were taken to Hawaii to rebuild the division because the division was just decimated.
Yeah.
Dean's company actually lost 3/4 of its men in the water. And I saw the casualty list done by written out in hand by the captain, Dean's captain, John Murdoch. And it was a very serious experience they went through. And in fact, it led to congressional investigations right afterward. As Dean said, this was a new experience, and it was a learning experience, but boy, the price was very high. And then after that,
the price was high. The price was high, but learning lessons actually helped on D-Day, because we, as you were saying, Colonel, the firing from the battleships just was not, what we thought it would be. They made a lot of noise, but didn't kill any of the entrenched Japanese. And it is what it is. One thing to remember about Tarawa is that the island is tiny. It's, what would you say, Dean, about 1 square mile, and longer than it is wide. It's only about 50 to 100 yards wide. 2.5
miles long and a half mile wide.
And so when the battleships were firing these big 16-inch guns, most of the shells were passing right over the island. So what it became was an infantry battle, where the Marines were trapped for a long time on a strip of sand. Dean never set foot on Tarawa until long after the war, because he was wounded in the water. But
I've been back 4 times now. I know that place pretty well.
You know it well now.
Dean, I know you've been back. I did want to cover some of that. When was the first time you went back to Tarawa?
2000. Just a minute here.
You were in the 1990s, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, what's that?
You did.
1982.
Yeah.
1982, 1983, and then that led on to going interviewing the Japanese, and a couple of years later. Now, by the way,
I know we got some pictures. I know we got some pictures of you traveled back. I did want to go in and discuss that story.
Yeah, we became close friends for 15 years. We corresponded. Akio Tani there. By the way, it was his. One of the officers on the Missouri was one of the students of his father, who was at that time a major general.
And this is on Guadalcanal, right? That picture.
Yes, it was. Yes.
And Tani was Tanny was the gun captain of that gun that they're
Gun
standing
captain of
behind.
he had three guns like that. That's where we're standing by, and he fired that right where I was one time. Here we are landing on the beach at Tarawa, and the fellow in the front, he's got a can of beer.
Is that Dick
Well,
Starr?
That's the same beach. That's the same beach we're heading into when we landed. Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, taking a beach with a beer can in your hand is much better than taking it with bullets coming at you in a rifle.
Now, by the way, that book is being read. You go to Jocko podcast number 202, and takes 4 hours to read it. He does one heck of a good job, Jocko Willenick.
And that's the podcast 202.
That's a podcast number 202.
At the website of Jocko Willenick, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Just go to Jocko number 202.
Yeah.
Come right on.
Colonel, it's a pleasure that you're with us. I know that my first deployment, I took a four-man team with me. I know they were a little bit more grizzled than you guys were. The average age for my detachment that went down, we were average age 31. And I know that you were 23 years old, and you were the grizzled man in your unit. So God bless you for being able to lead soldiers in battle who were younger than you during that time. I'm going to ask you a question on this part that is important. These lessons learned that you learned in Tarawa, you learned in battle, and I know when I first came back from my first tour, I had taken a four-man team with me. If it was me as a team leader, my team engineer, team sergeant, and team medic. And I remember on the route back, we picked up caskets of soldiers. We actually picked up 4 caskets for my first tour back. I was looking at them, I said, you know what, any of these guys could be my team. We could have all been returning in those caskets. What lesson learned? What were the impacts of those type of lessons to you personally? Besides the fact that there's a reason why you're living, you're alive. Thank God, you're 100 years old now. You have the story to tell. Speak on the behalf of the ones who can't. But what are some of the things that are personal to you, if you could share it with us?
Well, one aspect is that years ago, my reasoning was somebody who died old age, how fortunate they were to live to an old age rather than being killed as a youth. That's number one. So they should be happy they lived that long. That was one thing. The other thing was it's very difficult to ever get over all the buddies that were killed. Very difficult. You just don't.
It's difficult. I know every time I go back to Washington, I do go to Arlington, and it's still difficult. Yeah. Even going through that and seeing the men and women who sacrificed. Even going back to Iraq, I've been multiple times, just going past areas where we lost soldiers in those areas. It's difficult, but it's something that we carry in our hearts and our shoulders and our minds. And I'm glad you had an opportunity to link up with Stephen. I know one thing about Stephen. He's been with the Near East. He's been my senior editor from day one when the company was established.
Yeah,
and he can take really complex things and really clarify them. So that's one positive about it. So that
one thing
the average person can digest.
In working with Steve, there were some that we interviewed that were on the far side. Well, okay, do you want to accept this or not? And so I had a lot of hard decisions there to make. This one fellow had some great detail, but on the other hand, I knew that he kind of expanded in some other things, not on combat, but about what was happening in our world. And he had opinions, So he had to be a little bit careful. But anyway, there's nobody you could talk to that had the detail that he had, just on Saipan. Unbelievable.
Oh, that was the artillery. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Colonel, when you reached out to the Japanese adversaries who were obviously trying to kill you and your men on the battlefield, what has been what has been your relationship now over the years that you've been speaking to them?
Oh, to the veterans?
Not to the veterans, but to the Japanese veterans of the war.
I'm talking about Japanese veterans, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we became very close friends. Yeah. I had much more than that. Yeah.
And these were your adversaries in combat.
Oh,
right?
yeah. They're the ones that were shooting at me, and okay, one of them, Oba the Last Samurai. There's a book called Oba the Last Samurai, and I have it. And when I went to interview him, I wanted to find out more about these characters in there, but I found out that a lot of those characters were composite characters. They were not an actual guy. What a disappointment that was. But anyway, I had walked right through his men, walked right through where that same night 40 more were killed. I had walked right through them all. They were hiding among the bush. They didn't want to let themselves know that they were doing that. And as I saw one leg sticking out as I went back to get my arm dressed, where I got shrapnel from what had happened earlier up near Mount Tapachow on Saipan. So anyway, I saw legs sticking out, and it moved. I thought, well, that could be a Marine there, wounded. No, there were not one, but there were 3 Japanese, and I killed all 3 of them, and got the heck back to get myself my wound taken care of. And that night, as I say, 40 more were killed as they made a counterattack from that position. And they all reported to my friend Oba.
So who's one of the guys in that picture?
Yeah, he's one of the guys I interviewed. And now, not only that, at the time after Japan surrendered, there's a picture of him that shows up at one of our magazines about World War II. Here he is surrendering his sword, but what happened was, a part of that story was that Japan refused his promotion from captain to major because he had surrendered. Now Japan had already surrendered. You see?
And they still refused it. Yeah.
It's amazing. It doesn't seem like sometimes some things change regardless of the government.
Now there's one other
Colonel
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Colonel, I know that you're planning possibly a trip to Hawaii for 7 December, which is the bombing of Pearl Harbor. How is that coming along right now?
Okay, the Greatest Defense Foundation, headed up by Donnie Edwards, retired professional football player from San Diego Chargers. And
Colonel, we lost your audio. We lost the Colonel. Yeah, we lost it. I think the Bluetooths are gone. Stephen, let me ask you a question. How was? Sure. Oh, go ahead, Colonel. We can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
And who's your helper that is able to get your audio back up, Colonel?
Well, my daughter just came on and pushed the right button.
I'm still here.
We see the hand. We can see.
I'm still here.
Outstanding. That's one of your twins you got. She's wonderful. Thank you very much. We gave her a hard time today because we're trying to get your audio up and running.
Yeah. You did not give me a hard time. It was the phone and the iPad.
Right. The devices.
You guys are fine.
There's a lot more to tell you about what happened on Guadalcanal, Saipan, and Tinian, but we're beyond that point right now.
Well, we'll have another opportunity, Colonel. I did want to make sure that because your audio cut out for the 7th December, if you could cover it one more time.
I can mention a couple of points from Guadalcanal if you like to.
No,
we'll bring you. Yeah, we'll bring you back again, Colonel, because I do want to bring you back again just to.
There you go.
Just to speak before your birthday. But hopefully we see you in Hawaii on 7th December, and hopefully we get a chance to talk to you before and after that occasion.
The 8th of December is the Japanese time because they're the other side of the date line, you see.
Well, that's your birthday too. You were born on 8th December.
But I'm 8, but what I'm saying, normally it's talked of as being 7 because it is the time on this side of the international date line. Follow me?
You know, Colonel, everything happens for a reason. Like you said, you had a birth in your family on the day you were wounded in Tarawa, and on the day in the Japanese calendar when they conducted the attack is actually your birthday, and now you're 100 years old, and you give us that linkage.
5 months now and counting. Yeah.
God's blessing. I'll tell you what, Colonel. If I'm at your capability at 60, I'll be happy because God bless. You're definitely sharp with all the wounds that the body has taken, everything you've been through. We're blessed as a nation to have individuals like you amongst us in our midst.
Amen.
Colonel, I'm going to give you the last word. I'm going to give you the last word before we sign off. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, hold on. Let me find something in my notes here if I can find it. Here, I think this is it. Okay, these are the last things I wrote in Remarkable Recollections, and it's on my website. And here's what I went through. I applied the following Bible applications. Quote, I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. The other one is let your light shine before men and glorify your Father. Matthew 5:16.
Outstanding. Yeah. That is outstanding. That is my favorite quote. Outstanding, Colonel.
Oh, yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Colonel Stephen, thank you very much for joining us here. With all that said, I'm glad we were able to make this day in celebration, of course, for us a day later for 4th of July. But, Colonel, we're going to have you back again and keep up the fight. God bless you, keep you in our prayers. Your daughters are in prayers. And, Stephen, thank you very much for giving an opportunity for the Colonel to write his book. With that said, we'll see you all again.
All right.
There's New Paradigm.
Thank you.